This week on The Climate Show with Tom Heap, welcome to the jungle, or more specifically, a very wet woodland on Dartmoor that qualifies as a rainforest. And I love it. Hello, do join me for our first programme of 2023 where, as you can see, we've turfed ourselves out of the studio to come to this lush woodland. It's at the heart of the Dartmoor National Park, and temperate rainforests like this used to be pretty common in the UK. And today on the show we're going to look at how they could be expanded to provide more habitat and store more carbon. But much as I love this place, being warm and dry next to an open fire also feels powerfully attractive. And we hear about a new public information campaign encouraging us to think twice before lighting the burners. Up to 1/5 of Britain could have been covered by rainforests like this that I'm splashing through. Now, they may lack the raucous monkeys and alarming bugs of their tropical cousins, but they are rare and lively places. They've been reduced to fragments due to the pressures of farming, grazing and harvesting timber. And I'm about to meet a couple of people who really want to revitalise and protect these places. This is long ash wood on Dartmoor. To qualify as a rainforest, it must get at least 1.5 metres of rainfall every year. A good chunk of that has fallen in the past 24 hours.
I just feel so alive. I feel incredibly inspired by all this life that's surrounding us. You know, by the mosses, the lichens, the polypody ferns that are sprouting out of these old oak trees, and the bilberry bushes that are starting to grow around us.
It is energising, isn't it? It's the raging river, the life. It's almost sort of Garden of Eden-y, isn't it?
You know, they just glow green. This is a wood in winter, but it's incredibly green and verdant, even at this time of year.
Outside of Britain, temperate rainforests are found beside the Pacific Ocean, in New Zealand, Japan, Chile and the American Northwest. Here, this is the area where they once grew, and weather conditions are right for them to grow again. But these are the fragments that now cover less than 1% of Britain. Well, let's go and have a look at some of the things you particularly love.
Let's go and have a look.
Environmental campaigner Guy Shrubsole has just written a book on the lost rainforests of Britain. What about these ferns growing off here? These Back in there.
Yeah. But what we've also got are even rarer, what are known as Atlantic hazelwoods. And you get those particularly in places like the west coast of Scotland, but there are also little pockets of them in the West Country on Dartmoor, like here. So these are some, beneath all this moss is actually a hazel tree, just heaving with lichens.
I love this. So what's this black stuff
sort of
growing
black,
on here?
Blue, green, kind of. This is a species of lichen called peltigera. Sometimes they're called dog lichens because on the underside of them they've got little sharp teeth that look a bit like dog's teeth.
And another sight, just looking at that branch there, you see it with all those ivy roots around it? It looks like something that was created by the Harry Potter set dressers.
Yeah, they're wonderfully kind of gnarled and twisted trees that you get up here. So I've found something up here that I really want to show you that's very exciting. It's this orange fungus growing here. It's called hazel gloves fungus, and it's got these little orange hands kind of clasping the branch. What I'd like to see is more done to support farmers and landowners to reduce grazing pressure on the edges of our temperate rainforests and sort of create buffer zones in which they can expand again.
How wide would you like that to be?
I'd say 100 to 150 metres around our temperate rainforests. If we did that, we could actually double their area within a generation.
Taking productive land away from farmers is often controversial, even with subsidy. And that grazing pressure, just farm animals or deer as well? Do they need controlling?
Deer is certainly a problem, particularly in Scotland, where there are about 1 million deer now marauding around the countryside. We certainly need to be doing a lot more to control deer numbers, and I'm afraid that does mean, in the absence of any other natural predators, that does mean culling.
All the rich life in this place stores carbon, but climate change could threaten this.
So you can see from one set of wrinkles, which is the slowing down in the growth at the end of the year, to the more expanded area, how long the growth has been in 1 year. If you get a very dry, hot summer like this summer, this can put more pressure on these plants. And if you get a succession of them in a row, and these lead to fires, moorland fires, which sweep through the area, and maybe encourage pests and pathogens to survive over winter, then all these pressures together can be a massive risk.
Feels quite otherworldly in a way, doesn't it?
Yes. You can see why the Druids liked it.
But enlarging these places where so many wild things are would make them more resilient.
I think it's not unrealistic to look to double the size of England's temperate rainforests.
Rainforests that you can see, touch, smell, really feel, not just watch on your telly.
And not have to go all the way to the Amazon to see.
Since our last programme a month ago, we've had a deluge of climate news, from freezing temperatures across the centre of America to a barbecue winter in the Alps and protesters in Germany trying to stop the expansion of a massive coal mine. Seems like time for the year's first edition of the Tom Show. That's me catching up with our science correspondent, Thomas Moore. Nice weather for us on our park bench. What's been happening around the world in the last few weeks?
Lots more weird weather. So you've got very low temperatures as far south as Florida on the other side of the Atlantic, and very warm weather on this side of the Atlantic, with many countries breaking their records for January temperatures. In Warsaw, for example, 18 degrees, 4 degrees warmer than their previous record. So blown it completely out of the park. And it's that kind of shattering, the annihilation of records like that really makes climate scientists think, well, this is really changing very rapidly indeed.
Very little snow in the Alps over their Christmas skiing period. Are these things linked, this cold in America, warm in Europe?
So it's to do with the wiggliness of the jet stream, those high altitude winds that when things are going well, they whip around in a nice tight circle. But as things break down, and that has something to do with warming in the Arctic, it's warming 3 or 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, tends to meander more. And if you're on the south side of these waving winds, then you tend to get much warmer weather. So, for example, in Europe, that drew up hot air from West Africa, and also with the very warm sea temperatures this time of year, unusually so, that led to the blistering heat comparatively in January.
Yeah. Just briefly, in Germany, despite what we've been having in the weather, and Germany often talking the language on climate change, they're expanding a coal mine.
And this really does illustrate the difficulties that many countries are having because of what's happened in Ukraine and trying to move away from gas as rapidly as possible to keep the lights on. Germany is actually expanding this really dirty coal mine. They're using lignite, which is the dirtiest form of coal. And of course, coal is the dirtiest form of fossil fuel, and expanding it quite dramatically. And there is this big issue at the moment of police removing environmental activists, and it's leading to a real confrontation. In more kind of
confusing signals news, the next COP, the big climate summit, the chair is someone who runs an oil company. I mean, feels like Fox in charge of the hen house time.
Yeah, look, I mean, this next climate conference is going to be in Dubai, which caused quite a few hiccups around the world because, of course, that is, the centre of the oil universe.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely right. And indeed now, so the chief executive of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company is going to be the president of the summit. And that has led to a lot of environmental activists saying that this is just untenable.
Well, while we're on oil companies, there's also been some news about ExxonMobil. I think that over the time, anyway, one of the biggest corporates out there doing
are that their scientists knew all along and predicted about the effect that fossil fuels would have on climate change.
Yes, this is research done by Harvard and by Potsdam, the climate research group in Germany, and they've unearthed this trove of documents going back to the 1970s, suggesting that privately Exxon was well aware of what was going on, that there would be this predictable increase in both global temperatures and in carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. And of course that's traced back to fossil fuels, while at the same time they were denying it, and that denial continued into this century.
I gather they deny it. They say very strongly that they weren't as certain as that and are committed to tackling climate change. We must bring it home. There was a review that was announced when Liz Truss was Prime Minister about our journey to net zero. That review has now come out with some pretty strong thoughts.
Yes, indeed. And the suspicion of many environmental groups was at the time that Liz Truss was using this as an excuse to row back on the net zero commitments. But in fact, Chris Skidmore, Tory MP, has doubled down.
Doing the review, yeah.
Indeed, he's doubled down. I mean, he's saying the risks of not zero are greater than net zero, that this is the economic opportunity of the century, he says. And he comes up with 25 different things that need to be done by 2025, which is when the Parliament ends. And they include moving rapidly into onshore wind, going into a revolution in rooftop solar to increase the amount of energy we get from the sun. There should be eco-labelling on food so that people know the footprint of the food that they eat. Some really interesting ideas, and they're saying that households could save between £400 and £6,000 a year by shifting towards green energy and so on.
After the break, we'll be answering some of your questions. And a new campaign is asking us to light the log burner less often due to its impact on air quality. Government data suggests they could be worse than traffic when it comes to those small particles that can be bad for our health. A real risk or just killjoy environmentalism? Come back to us after the break. Welcome back, and I've come off the moor now and I'm looking forward to getting fireside in this pub. But could the fire, the burning of those logs, be doing more damage to our air in terms of pollution than we realise? Here's Sky's correspondent, Matthew Thompson.
Wood-burning stoves have exploded in popularity. Sales are up by 2/3 in the last year alone. Partly that's driven by trends in interior design, but also increasingly as a practical response to the soaring cost of energy. Ian Moore runs his business from home, and this winter has found himself using his burner more than usual.
We've turned our heating down quite low, and then we try to stay in just, the kind of rooms with the wood burner where the heat comes out from there. As the price of gas and energy has just soared, then we've definitely become quite reliant on it. I'll probably try and work in this room, so just keep it a little bit warmer, and we really try and keep those energy bills down.
The low costs may be attractive, but domestic wood burning comes with costs of a different kind. It produces more of a dangerous source of air pollution called PM 2.5 than all the cars on the road.
Breathing PM 2.5 is responsible for somewhere around 20 to 30,000 extra deaths in the UK each year. When it comes to wood burning, we think that around 17% of the PM 2.5 that is being produced in the UK is coming from people burning wood. The best way to see the health impact of air pollution is to look at those places where they've taken wood burning away. There's less wheeze in the children in those communities, there's less people attending hospital for heart and respiratory problems.
New research commissioned by Global Action Plan as part of a new awareness campaign suggests few people know just how polluting burning wood can be. And even when they do have some awareness, the impact was typically seen to be small compared to things like traffic and heavy industry. The research also found that most people using burners do so for aesthetic purposes, with only a relatively small proportion using it as their main source of heating. And it found that people who use burners often show scepticism about the impact of their stoves.
We're launching this campaign to help provide information to people who already have a wood burner. The information isn't out there at the moment. There isn't a public conversation about the health impacts of wood burning, so I think people need to know this.
This is my son's bedroom, and every evening and morning he does his preventer inhaler.
But whilst changing minds could take time, those particularly sensitive to air pollution, like Ruth's heavily asthmatic son, are living with the consequences here and now.
I can frequently smell wood smoke in his bedroom, and I've plugged up, there's an old kind of Edwardian air vent there. My son was a bit wheezy, not too badly, but I put him to bed in a room that smelt of smoke. And I just thought how wrong it was that, you know, not only is he breathing it in outside, but now, you know, we're at home in what's supposed to be kind of a safe environment, and there is absolutely nothing I can do.
The government said it has already acted to regulate wood burners and to ban more polluting fuels. The Stove Industry Alliance said modern designs produce significantly less PM 2.5 than open fires and are a cost-effective way to heat a home. For some, wood burning is a necessity. For others, it is a choice. By making the dangers of that choice plain, campaigners hope that public enthusiasm for this achingly trendy accessory slowly burns itself out. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
Well, to talk through this, I'm joined fireside, of course, by environmental writer George Monbiot. And just a little confession, I'm a bit of a fan of the flame to heat my own home. Indeed, my publicity picture shows me next to a wood pile, so not much hiding there. But George, do you feel comfy next to the hearth?
Well, it feels great, doesn't it? It does give you literally a warm glow to sit beside the fire. And yeah, I installed wood burners myself years ago, thinking it was the right thing to do. But as the evidence has accumulated, it's very clear that it's the wrong thing to do.
What evidence are you pointing at?
So this is about pollution. It's about outdoor pollution and it's about indoor pollution. It's about the extraordinary level of particulates, tiny little particles of soot and other materials produced by wood-burning stoves. We now know that they make a very major contribution to outdoor pollution. We know less about the impact on indoor pollution, but it seems to be very high indeed. In fact, if you've got a wood-burning stove in your house, it's almost certainly the major cause of indoor pollution and could be having a very significant impact on your health.
Are we breathing it in now?
We're breathing it in now. Open fires are even worse than wood-burning stoves, but however carefully you use a wood burner, you will have to open the door from time to time to refuel. And as one study shows, when you do so, there's a flood of these little tiny particulates coming out into your house and into your lungs and affecting every organ in your body.
It seems to me a little context is important here. Air pollution, including these PM 2.5s, the dangerous smaller particles, have been going down quite steeply and quite successfully on recent years. So the threat from air pollution is lower than it was. So is it really such a big risk?
Well, it depends which study you look at, because one study suggests that even though only 8% of people have wood burners, it produces more particulate pollution than all the vehicles on the road.
But that's partly because vehicles have gone down so much.
Yeah.
It's a story of vehicle success.
Well, that's right. And so we thought we were cleaning up the air. But as vehicle particulates have gone down, wood particulates have been rising as more and more people have been installing wood-burning stoves. And so what we see then is a massively disproportionate impact of the small number of households which are using these stoves, which has to be said is generally middle-class households.
This is always a slight question of the lesser of two or more evils, isn't it? Because certainly my view when I put in a wood-burning stove was I don't want to take fossil carbon out of the ground. There's a whole message of keep it in the ground, and wood, the wood behind you, is in the biosphere. It's being cycled round, and as a principle that felt better to me.
Yeah, well, that was exactly my view as well. That's why years ago I installed wood burners too. I thought it was the right thing to do. I wanted to unhook myself from burning gas. And home heating is difficult. There's no question about that. It's expensive, it's difficult. There are few good ways of doing it. But if I were to make those decisions today, I would install a heat pump rather than wood-burning stoves, because in that way you can both cut out the fossil fuels and the huge amount of pollution now involved in stoves.
What do you want to see happen to wood-burning stoves?
So I want to see the sale of these stoves banned.
Banned?
Yep, banned. And the same goes for pellet boilers. I want to see that banned as well. And I want to see the use of these stoves phased out with help for those people who've got no other form of heating. That's important. You know, there are some people who have come to depend on those stoves. They will need government help. But a lot of people have them for aesthetic reasons. We should be phasing that out. It is not fair to be exposing other people to your pollution because you like the warm glow of sitting by a fire.
Is it really justifiable to put a ban in place?
Well, look, wood burners have got more efficient in the same way that the guillotine was more efficient than the axe for chopping off people's heads. They still do you great harm. You know, I'm not saying that everyone who's exposed to a wood burner is killed by it, but we are, as a population, being harmed by wood burning stoves. That's undeniable. It's foolish to try to deny that obvious truth.
Well, thank you very much, George. And now we've got time for some of your questions. And the first one comes from Abdiaziz Urur, who asks, in Somalia, climate change is real, although its carbon footprint is less than 0.002% of global emissions. But as it is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, how can the Somali government get climate finance and justice? We asked Professor Salimul Hook to answer this one for you.
Thank you very much for the question, Abdulaziz. It's a very good question. In fact, Somalia has one of the lowest carbon footprints, as you mentioned, and is one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change, along with many other poor countries. So last year in COP27 in Egypt, we actually succeeded in getting all countries, including the rich countries, to agree to set up a new fund called the Loss and Damage Fund to provide support to the victims of climate change like Somalia. This fund is now going to be set up and hopefully get up and running very soon. And at that point, Somalia will be able to apply to get funding.
And now on to a question from Corey, who asks, how will the mining for minerals that are used in electric vehicles for batteries affect the climate and environment?
Hi, Corey. Thanks for your question. The key thing to focus on here is life cycle emissions. That's the total emissions emitted by a car over its lifetime that comes from both driving it and from building it. Firstly, you need to bear in mind that a majority of a vehicle's emissions come from the driving of it rather than the building of it. And secondly, because it's powered by electricity rather than burning fuel, an EV's total life cycle emissions are therefore much lower than a conventional petrol equivalent car.
Now, before we go, just time for some good news. Britain broke its record again on Tuesday for power generation from wind, with turbines consistently providing around half of all our electricity this week, according to the National Grid. It's helped to cut our reliance on gas for power generation, reducing emissions, as well as the amount the government is shelling out to support households with their bills this winter. Well, that's all we've got time for this week from Devon. But remember, you can catch up with the Daily Climate Show weekdays at 3:30 on Sky News, and keep across all our climate coverage on the website or the Sky News app. But for now, see you next week.